Welcome back, friends. I hope that you are having a good start to your week. It's not as warm as it was a week ago, but it's okay. I understand that this is the yo-yo of spring, and I'm glad that you're here joining me for this postscript. Nevertheless, this last Sunday, we continued our Lenten series focused on forms of internal exile. It's a heavy topic, but I think it's necessary for us to look at places in our society, not just in terms of the practices of a particular government, but some of the structures that guide our daily existence, whether it be in schools, churches, or other institutions. And so this last Sunday, I focused on the violence, which is often understated, but it's kind of built in. Sometimes it's direct and it's overt. We are painfully aware of those incidents of violence. But there are many other ways in which people are made to feel invisible. And specifically those persons who identify as two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, or asexual. So there are lots of different ways that we show up in the world and express ourselves. And it is our belief here at First St. Andrews, as you know, that who you are is an image of God, however that expression shows up and manifests. And so we welcome and strive to better understand, but no matter what, support and lift up. So in part of my sermon, and this is what I'll focus on during this postscript, I talked about the way in which certain reactionary formations develop around the category of a phantasm. Phantasm is a term that comes from psychoanalysis, and it tries to name our tendency to displace quite reasonable fears and anxieties onto an object or a person or a group of persons in order to not have to look at and confront what is really upsetting us or making us anxious and afraid. So, for example, a child, I know I did, and I'm sure many of you did as well, but children will often displace their reasonable anxieties and fears onto monsters or other threatening, menacing objects, either in the closet or under the bed or somewhere, right? Sounds we hear, the shapes of hat racks, I know, have caused many people to jump and be startled. And so this kind of displacement is natural. It's a natural function, but it's good for us to be aware of it. And so unfortunately, in our present time, not just in the United States, but also in Canada, and I would venture to say in almost every part of the world, certain forces have reacted against the threat caused by climate change and countless other things. These are real threats that we should all take seriously. But instead of looking at them and confronting them and figuring out what to do to limit our consumption and to live more ecologically attuned, we displace those fears. We avoid taking responsibility for our role in the current state of the planet, and we displace them onto an object. And that object or name right now very often is gender, and what you'll hear certain people call gender ideology. It's a failure to understand the word ideology. I'm not going to go into that etymology right now, but it's a misuse of the word. But what they're really doing is they're using a word to incite certain political passions. It helps to socially organize, but it socially organizes people around an enemy. And sadly, that is something that human beings have tended to do for almost all of our history, maybe all of our history. We have this unique, almost, capacity for shared attention and task commitment. But very often, our ability to sort of cohere as a group is not just focused on a task, but focused on an enemy. Someone, some people, some country, some belief, whatever, that we see in an antagonistic way. Now, this has terrible consequences for the whole of humanity, not to mention the planet. Because while you're busy, focused on this, which isn't really what your fears and anxieties are about, you're not doing the thing, you're not addressing what's really causing your fear and your anxiety. I think every good therapist has probably had to tell their client maybe what you're really afraid of, right? Or trying to get at what's underneath what is articulated by the person undergoing therapy or analysis. So similarly, I believe we have a responsibility as people of faith to try to bring people to consciousness about what's really causing us fear and anxiety. But it requires that we pause and we spend time in places that we would rather not spend time. The benefit of us doing that is that we actually get to create spaces that are safe and supportive for communities that are currently, with very good reason, afraid, who have experienced persecution and discrimination and are continuing to face the threat of these very real daily parts of their existence as a result of that process that I named earlier, the creation of phantasms. And so we have to move away from that. We have to be very honest and truth tell, despite how difficult it might be. But I think together, in faith, humility, and compassion, we can do that, and we can become the church that I believe we're called to be, and I believe we all want to become. Thanks for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you next week.